Well, the final days of this election campaign, as we've just been discussing, have been dominated to some extent by the debate over marriage equality, an issue where there are distinct policy differences between the two major parties. Labor is vowing to legislate changes to the Marriage Act within 100 days of taking office. In fact, Bill Shorten said the other day it will be his first order of business if he's elected. For the coalition, it's promising to hold a national plebiscite by the end of the year, but MPs, including some senior ministers, are refusing to say if they'll support a yes vote, if that's how the country votes, when the matter returns to Parliament. Queensland MP Warren Entsch is working with the Attorney-General George Brandis to draft the question for a plebiscite. He joins us from Cairns this morning. Warren Entsch, welcome to breakfast.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Fran.
So the Prime Minister says, and he's said it repeatedly over the last week, he's got no doubt a yes vote in the plebiscite would pass the Parliament. In fact, he says it would sail through. And yet we have senior ministers like Scott Morrison and Julie Bishop hedging their bets a bit, refusing to commit to voting yes in follow-up legislation to change the Marriage Act, even if there's a majority vote. How can the Prime Minister be so certain that it would sail through, do you think?
Well, let's have a deal with the reality of how the parliamentary system works. Bill Shorten says he's going to get the Parliament, and understand from my perspective, I put up a private member's bill, so I was quite happy to put it into the file.
Yep.
Now that was rejected by the party room, and they said we want a plebiscite. Now, initially I was disappointed, but the feedback that I've got from the broader community, and I've had, as you know, I've been a strong advocate for the gay community for a long time. I've had thousands of people respond to this.
Yep.
The very strong view is that the Australian people want a say in this. They want to be part of the decision on this particular issue, and it's very important to them. And they don't want the decision to be exclusively that of the politicians. Now, looking at our political system, Bill Shorten, heaven forbid if we were to get Bill as Prime Minister, but if he was to put it into the House of Reps, fine. And if he had the majority, irrespective of whether the coalition opposed it or not, it would get through.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the end of the matter, because does not become law until it goes through the Senate. Now, in the Senate, have a look at the populism of the independents and the minor parties. And the difficulty we've had in getting a whole broad raft of legislation through in the last decade, for goodness sake. Now, do you think that's going to change with the controversial thing like marriage equality? Do you honestly think that they would sit back when you've got so much pressure from so many different interest groups focusing in on the Senate, who would have an iceberg hope and hell in getting through?
Well, doesn't the same go for the plebiscite then? I mean, if Malcolm Turnbull wins and he puts the plebiscite enabling legislation, couldn't that be blocked in the Senate? I mean, it might be blocked by the crossbench you talked about there, or Labor and the Greens.
Fran, I have spoken to many that would vote in the reps against marriage, a gay marriage. They privately they support it, but they're worried about the ramifications of their own constituency. And they have said to me, if it comes to a plebiscite, they also of the view that if we go to a plebiscite, the Australian public supports it with a yes, then they will absolutely come on board and support it. No question about it. And so the reality is, this is my view now. I've very much come to the view this is something that we need to support, that the Australian public have to make this decision.
Okay,
yes,
so let's stick with that for a minute, and I want to come back to the other point I just made. But Tony Abbott said overnight too, he agreed with you, voters would feel ripped off if politicians ignored the wishes of the people. But yet we are hearing from Scott Morrison and Julie Bishop that on the one hand they say they respect the will of the people, but they won't say they'll vote, if it was a yes vote, that they would necessarily vote yes. So what is that signalling, that people will abstain, and is that good enough in your view?
Well, they're quite entitled to do that. And this is not something exclusive to our side of politics. Remember, there was a Labor senator resign from the Senate because of a strong view. Now, people, I'm not going to get in and attack people because of their views one way or the other. This is something that should not be decided by the politicians. It should be decided by the Australian people. Now, if people have if members of the Parliament or the Senate have strong personal views and choose to abstain, then they're quite entitled to do that. That doesn't mean to say that it will be lost. It would not be lost. It would be just some that were abstaining. However, if they decided that they wanted to take a stand against the will of their people, particularly in the Senate, where in the reps we represent a region, and so they could argue, well, my region is against it, and it's not the will of the Australian people, but nevertheless they could argue it. But in the Senate, they represent a state or a territory, and if the state and the territory come out and support this, it would be a very, very, very brave senator and a very brave House of Reps member that decides they want to go against the will of the people. Given it's gone to a vote of the Australian public, it's made a decision. You only have to reflect on Ireland. That's a classic example where there was a plebiscite. There are those that said, oh, well, have a look at it. There was only a small amount. Yes, there was a relatively small amount, but at the end of it, there has been no effort to overturn the decision. And the one thing that I see with the Irish people is that they are very, very proud of their decision.
Okay.
And they totally support it. Now, if we were to go and put in a plebiscite, to do vote in the Parliament, and even if they, to try and get it through the Senate, it would be an absolute outrage on large sections of the Australian community. If there was a plebiscite and there was a strong support within the Australian community, then that would be the end of it.
Okay, but can I just we're speaking with Warren Entsch, he's the member for Leichhardt. He's a leading voice in support in the Parliament, in support of marriage equality. But if before it goes to a plebiscite, the Parliament has to pass legislation enabling the plebiscite, what happens if that is blocked by Labor and the Greens? Would that be, as Tony Abbott has suggested, game over? There would be no plan B, no vote on marriage equality?
I say you're talking about something. I don't believe it's possible that would occur, in so much as, again, you're standing up and saying we are going to deny an opportunity for the Australian public who overwhelmingly are demanding an opportunity to have a say in this. And I think that people will find that there are a lot of people out there, I say, that would vote against a bill as they would have against mine, but have said to me, if we go down the plebiscite track, we will support it 100%. I've got no doubt in my mind that the overwhelming majority, both in the reps and in the Senate, will support it.
Even though Labor and the Greens don't support a plebiscite at this moment?
It's a bit like the GST election, which they keep bringing up now. It was John Howard took the Labor Party absolutely vehemently opposed. Greens opposed. When he took it to the election and he won comprehensively that election in 2000, then they come on board. The Labor Party came on board because, again, it was the will of the people. There was an absolute condition. Now, absolute support for it, and we're doing the same thing. There are two choices. When you look at this issue, there are two choices. If you vote for the Labor Party, then you're voting for the politicians to make the decision. If you vote for the coalition, you are voting for a plebiscite, so the Australian public has a say. Now, it is clear as that there is an absolute mandate there, and I've got to tell you, if we are successful on Tuesday, which heaven forbid, I hope we are, there will be a clear, defined mandate. We are discussing it here on your program today. Bill Shorten has brought it up as a major issue, as a significant difference between the two of us, so nobody can argue that the coalition wouldn't have a mandate to do it. And, do we throw away that mandate? I would suggest to you, absolutely not.
Warren Entsch, thank you very much for joining us on Breakfast.
Thank you.
Warren Entsch is the LNP member for Leichhardt and leading advocate for marriage equality in the coalition.